right, guys, it is time to get down and dirty and get to work on old Tina. I have a guy coming either this evening or tonight to buy the axles that are under Tina. Therefore, I have to get it on the lift in the shop and get the axles out from underneath it. I do have a parts truck that I went and bought for single wheel axles. So we'll be stripping this down the rest of the way. It was a complete truck. It was wrecked. And you can see that the frame is quite bent. So we got to do some stripping down on it, get the axles out from under it, clean the axles up the way we did the front axle that's under Tina currently. Redo all that. Swap the steering over from this axle, or from that axle to this axle. We got our work cut out for us for the next few days. Between getting these axles cleaned up and painted and getting them under Tina, and then it's Thursday evening right now. I'm probably going to tear into shortening the frame this week to get that done and over with and out of the way, because I've been procrastinating it and headaching it for a while now. So without further ado, we're going to walk across the parking lot here and go get Tina and bring her in the shop, start pulling the axles. Let's go. Look at old girl. She's come a long way. This is gonna be so sick. Don't mind my interior. I've been messing around with some dash panels. Stupid crowd killer. We trying to figure out what we can make work with the 6.7 dash, and it is hot in here. The window broke down. Oh, come on. Good grief. Very bouncy because we don't have shocks hooked up. I am beyond ready to drive this thing. Beyond ready. Get her in here and get these axles out from under it. Hopefully make some serious progress on this truck this week, because it has been waiting too long. I think that's about it. I think that's the spot. Yep, that's about accurate. I'm so tired of heat. I don't want to really say that because I prefer summer over winter. But whenever it rains for 4 days straight and then decides to be 90 degrees outside the next day, it makes it very humid around here. It's not fun. But I'm gonna set you guys up on time lapse. We're gonna get this thing set up on the lift, get it up off the ground, swap some stock wheels and tires to the front end, and then start disconnecting everything and getting this axle out. I probably won't do much talking. We'll just get down to work because we got stuff to get done. So without further ado, pitter patter, let's get at her. We're gonna sound deaden the roof and see if we can cut down on the heat that comes through that thing. I was sitting out, I had the truck parked out here this morning, was sitting inside messing with the programmer, had the truck running, had the AC on, and I was getting cool air from the AC, but I could feel the heat just beating off of that sheet metal. So we're gonna sound deaden it and see if we can cut the temperature down a little bit farther. Let's go. So y'all know, since like the beginning, I've talked about putting a 6.4 powerstroke dash into Tina and taking the 06 dash out. Well, this week I finally went and bought one. I found a sweet deal, paid like $200 for all the stuff in the bed and a full rear seat and everything. Got a pretty good deal on it all. This dash is technically out of a 2015, but I'm still gonna make it work. Right now, I'm trying to figure out what I wanna do for a gauge cluster, because obviously they're completely different styles. You got the 2015 bezel and everything here, and you got the 6.0 powerstroke bezel here. Completely different moldings and everything to them. So I'm gonna see what I can make work as far as having the 6.0 gauge cluster backing with the 15 style bezel up front. We're probably gonna have to cut the entire center out of this to where we just have the outer part to lay over the 6.0 cluster. But we're gonna take some needles and stuff from this cluster and put it on the 6.0 cluster, try and make the 6.0 cluster look newer. So without further ado, I'm gonna set you guys up on time lapse. We're gonna get at it and see what we can do here. Let's go. All right, we're getting the plan worked out here. We got the dash into the shop here, and check this out. So this is what our gauge cluster looks like through the steering column and through the 6.7 dash bezel. So we still got a gap back here that needs to be covered up, and we got some trimming to do to get the bezel all the way set in, but it's gonna work. Once this gets picked up a little bit farther, gets more up around this area. So we'll end up trimming this down, or we'll end up trimming this down, one of the two. But then this is going to be our filler panel for this gap back here. So I'm gonna cut this out and use that panel plus the 6.7 panel to make something that fits against that cluster and hides all the gaps. And then we'll incorporate the 6.7 face panel, clear face panel, to cover everything. So without further ado, we're gonna set you guys up on a time lapse and pitter patter, get at her. All right, guys, I kind of screwed up a little bit. Forgive the noise, but I got it in here, and it'll work. But we're gonna use this run as a trial and error. Doesn't look the best that it could, so I'm probably gonna redo it. This is the cluster, the gauge cluster out of my parts truck outside. So there's still the factory 06 cluster in Tina that I'll probably tear into and trim up and redo all this, but check it out. So we cut out the little part of the bezel that sits to the gauge cluster on the factory 06 dash bezel. We cut that out to use that for a filler panel. We got that stuck in there, but there's I trimmed too much out of the top, so there's still a gap up here. And then there was a gap down here. So I tried heating it up and bending it down, and I got a little too hot and burnt a couple spots and melted some stuff. So I'm not happy with it. So we'll end up, whenever we get the dash in there, we'll just redo it with the cluster that's in Tina currently. But for now, we're gonna strip apart this gold 6.0 powerstroke parts truck outside. And I've already disconnected everything from the cab to the engine and the cab to the frame. So we're ready to pick it up off the frame. And I got the tractor here. So we're gonna go ahead and set you guys up on the tripod here. Pick that cab up and start stripping this truck down outside. Yeah, I got a 2-post lift, but I'm doing it outside because I don't have a way to move this thing around. It doesn't steer for crap. So yeah, we're just gonna strip it down out here. Let's go. All right, so as you can see in that last clip, the axle fell off my jack stands onto the floor, but it is, for the most part, stripped down. I still have to take the brake lines off and the ABS sensor wires off and out of the way, and a couple other little brackets and stuff, but it's, for the most part, stripped apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and start wire wheeling it, but without further ado, I'm gonna get back at her. Let's go. All right, the shop is a disaster, but we got the axle all coated up. It's in a drying process right now. Need to tilt that fan back down there to it. Axle's drying up. While that's doing that, I'm going to start prepping the rear end. And to do that, we're gonna take this bed back off, lift the bed back up off the frame so that I can get into the frame rails easier and wire wheel the frame rails down, get the frame rails all coated, get the leaf springs coated, and go over the whole back half the same way we did the front half. And then we'll get the rear axle out from underneath the parts truck frame and roll it up under here, wire wheel it, coat it the same way we're doing everything else. And we'll start putting it all back together. I do still have to shorten the frame like we talked about, but I'm not sure exactly when I'm gonna do that. I don't know if I want to put the truck together with the bed gap and drive it around a little bit and see what it does, see what happens, see if I have any issues I need to work out or not, or if I want to go ahead and dive right into shortening the frame, chop it all up, all in one whack, and then try to shake it down and figure out issues. I don't really think I think I've pretty much solved everything. So I don't really think there's going to be much to have to work out on it. So I might as well just go ahead and chop it. I'm just procrastinating it because I know it's going to be a pain in the butt trying to chop this frame with the cab still on it. But I've got an idea thought up. I just got to execute it. So without further ado, I'm going to set you guys up. We're going to lift this bed up off the frame and get the bed outside, out of the way. We're gonna start wire wheeling this frame rail. Let's go. Also, you would think by now, after all this wire wheeling I've done, crap, I just dropped the tripod. After all this wire wheeling I've done, you'd think that I would invest in a sandblaster. Nope, just keep buying wire wheels. One of these days, we'll get bougie. We'll get us a sandblaster, but for now, wire wheel and a grinder. That's what we do. Let's go. Oh, just kidding. That got a little too sketchy. We started to pick the bed up, and then the frame, the whole truck started teetering on the lift. The frame came off of the rear lift pads, and it was basically halfway balancing itself on the front lift pads. So we need the weight of the bed on the back to offset the weight that's in the front to keep the truck balanced on the lift for the time being. So what I'm gonna have to do is go outside and get the rear axle first and prep the rear axle, coat it, paint it, prep the leaf springs, the blocks, and the U-bolts, and paint all of those, and then bolt it all on so that we can have the weight of the rear axle offset the rear end, and then take the bed off. Man, this is a process. But I'm thankful I caught that before we lost the truck off the lift and had an even bigger mess. So we're gonna get you guys set up outside and get the grinder out there, cut the U-bolts because they're too tall to get a socket on. So I gotta cut the tops of the U-bolts off so I can get a socket on the nuts, get the U-bolts off, shocks disconnected, get that rear axle out of the parts truck frame and roll it around here so that we can get it buttoned up underneath Tina. And continue on. Let's freaking go. All right, guys, I apologize for getting a little bit ahead of myself again, but I got the axles both wire wheeled up, painted, coated, and bolted back up under the truck, and we got the single wheels back on. So we are now completely single wheel 3/4 ton again. I've already pulled the exhaust off, and I pulled the drive shaft out, and I have the frame marked out for the amount of frame rail that I need to take out under the cab to scoot the back half to the front half and close that gap right there. So I'm going to set you guys up on the time lapse right here, and we're going to time lapse chopping this frame in half and scooting this back half together. It's kind of sketchy the way I have it all set up, but I'm pretty sure it'll be all right. Yeah, I'll show you what I got going on. All right, so we have the lift itself holding the front half of the frame and the cab up. I have some washers underneath there because it was just a half inch off. But the washers are sitting on the pad area that the cab would be touching anyways. So that's not that sketchy. It might look sketchy, but it's not that sketchy. The sketchy part is the floor jack that I have under the frame holding the back half of the frame up. If that frame slides off of that square tubing or the square tubing slides off the floor jack, then the back half of the frame is falling. I guess I should probably get some jack stands out just in case. But that's what we got going on. We're chopping 4 1/4 inches out of the frame rail and scooting the back half to the front half and welding it back up, and then we'll plate the inside. But yeah, I'm gonna get you guys set up on time lapse, and we're gonna get to chopping, get this project underway. I already cut the rear cab mounts off the frame rail, so the back half of the cab is free to move down the frame. But once this is done, shorten the drive shaft and make some body mount stands for the bed and bolt the bed up. Then just wire the taillights in, put a back bumper on it. Getting close. Let's freaking go. All right, guys, as you've seen, we got the frame chopped and shortened, and she is looking a million times better. We don't have a big old gap in between the cab and the bed anymore. Our fender is straight. It is like a day later since the time lapse of shortening the frame. Yesterday, I messed around and started mocking up my exhaust a little bit. So we got that on there. I still need to get some new straight pieces that go from the downpipe to the over axle part, because the straight pipe that I got is complete polished stainless and has no slip-on parts at all. So I don't want to use that. I don't want stainless pipe going straight and then raw pipe back here. So I gotta find some straight pipe to finish the exhaust out. I had a guy stop by today and measured out for the drive shaft, because we're gonna have just a straight one-piece drive shaft built to go from there to there. It's only 70 inches, so we can do a one-piece drive shaft with a slip hook in the center and get rid of the carrier bearing here. Get the wide camera out there a little bit. You can see we got our frame rails welded up. I still need to sand them down, clean the insides so we can plate the insides. But they're all sanded, they're all welded up and looking pretty good. Still got to smooth everything out, and whenever I smooth these welds out, I'm going to go through and smooth the frame rail out. You see I've been cutting these studs off of these bolts that stick out down the frame rail all the way down through here. I've been cleaning up the frame rail, getting all this flaky rust scale off and getting it down to bare metal so we can smooth the whole frame out like this right here, and then coat it and paint it. This side over here, I have already smoothed out the welds from where we had the cab mount originally mounted for the old position. We got the cab mount cut off, got the welds smoothed out. I am going to go through and tack and weld where I gouged into the frame a little bit, so I can smooth that out and not have those cut marks in it. But yeah, I am going to go ahead and I'm going to pull these bolts out of the frame, which is basically just an exhaust hanger for the downpipe. And then I'm going to pull the transmission crossmember bolts out so that I can go through and start smoothing this whole frame rail down. And we'll time lapse it. I want to get this frame rail to where it's just straight, flat, and smooth all the way down, minus the transmission bolts, and then the cab mount will be right here. So that will be on this side, and then this side over here won't be as smooth because we have bolt heads for the there's little plastic clips under here that hold the brake lines and the fuel lines. And those, instead of just having little Christmas tree looking push pins that pop into the frame holes, they're actually bolted to the frame rail. So I gotta leave those bolts where all that stays held in place. But other than that, everything's coming off. We're gonna leave this because we might end up in the future putting the e-brake back in it. But for now, being an automatic, I don't really see the point in having one because I never use it anyways. So we're gonna set you guys up and get to cleaning this frame rail up, grinding these welds down, smoothing these welds out. Got to smooth these out up here for the cab mount, and then clean the frame up here and get the cab mounted probably later on today. So without further ado, pitter patter, let's get at her. All right, guys, I got the frame rails all sanded up. I got the welds all smoothed out. Got most of the rust sanded off. As you can see, this is the passenger side frame rail here. I did put a little bit of paint over the spot where the two frame rails joined together, and I welded just so I could see if there was any high or low spots to be able to sand it down smooth. And I want this frame rail, for the most part, like, I know it's not going to be perfect, but I want it for the most part to where whenever you look at it, you can't tell that it's been shortened unless you look at the inside and see the plates. So I like to get them sanded down real good and throw some paint over and be able to see some highs and lows. Like, you can see a little dip right there at the top, but the bottom, that's what we want the top to look like. We want the top to look like this area right here. So that's this side. This side over here came out better. This is the driver's side. It came out better, a lot more smoother. But yeah, the whole frame rail, I'm gonna switch you guys around. Whole frame rail on this side, sanded down to bare metal. So I'm gonna go ahead and set you guys up on the time lapse. I've already cleaned this cab mount. We still have to grind the welds down, smooth the welds down, and then we'll stick the cab mounts back up here and time lapse getting the cab mounts tacked up and welded on. And then once that's done, we'll go through and put a coat of paint all the way down this frame rail. So without further ado, pitter patter, let's get at her. All right, guys, sorry for the light, strobe and everything. It's a little bit better. I got the cab mounts tacked up. They're in place. The cab is exactly 8 1/8 inches, or no, not 8, 11. I found a reference point on the frame and measured from the cab down to the reference point on both sides. We match on both sides. We're the same side to side on both sides. The cab is set. It's tacked, both mounts are tacked in place. So all I have to do now is weld it out, but I'm not going to time lapse that because my phone's on like 10%, so I'm just going to do it, and we'll move on to the next thing, which will be making my bed stands for the bed and getting the bed bolted up. So without further ado, I'm going to lay some beads and we're going to move on to the friggin' bed. Let's go. All right, guys, we're all burnt in. Cab mounts are done. The bed is lined up with the cab. And the next order of business is going to be making body lift stands for the bed back here. Because of where the cab sits on the frame and how the cab sits on the frame, the bed has to be spaced up off the frame 2 inches. So I'm going to take some round, like 2-inch DOM quarter wall. I'm just going to cut it in 2-inch spacers, and we'll just stick them underneath the bed at each bolt hole that we're going to use. This technically 79 Ford has 8 bed bolts, 2 in the front, 4 in the center, and 2 in the back. But this specific bed, with the rusty patina we got, one of the supports on the back of the bed is completely rusted out, basically, where the bolts go. So it's useless. Like, there's no point in putting bolts there. So it'll have 6 in it. It'll have 2 in the back, and is it... Yeah, it's this support right here that's rusted out. So it'll have 2 in the back, 2 in this center, the front half of the fender well, and then 2 in the front. Perfectly solid. Perfectly solid. But that's going to end this video. You guys can come back next weekend, Saturday, hopefully. probably Sunday. And hopefully we'll be driving it. Like I said, I don't remember if it was, like I said in the previous clips, I had a guy come by and measure out for a one-piece drive shaft, and he's supposed to be getting it to me by Tuesday. So once the drive shaft's in, the bed's mounted, my exhaust pipe comes in sometime next week as well. We'll get that done, hook the brake lines up, bleed the brakes. We should be ready to take a rip. It's so wild to me to see this finally come to life. It feels like we've been working on this forever, guys. When in reality, it hasn't even been a year yet. A year ago, this week, I was putting Tina together, just the cab with the flatbed. I put it together on a gas or two-wheel drive chassis. And I started that whole project like this week and had it running and driving and took it to Indy Jamboree last year. So now she's a completely different animal coming back to Indy this year. That's the plan. Indy four-wheel drive Jamboree in Indianapolis, Indiana. We're going to be there. And I'm planning on and wanting to drive it there. It's 4.5 hours. Planning and wanting to drive it. So we'll see within the next coming up week how things pan out. And how she does out on the road. I'm going to leave. That's another thing I wanted to address. I'm going to leave the 06 dash and seats and everything in it for the time being, just because I don't want to rip that entire dash out with 3 weeks left for this till this show. I don't want to take the entire dash out and have a cobbled up mess to go to this show. So I'm just going to clean the 06 dash up. We might paint it, throw some carpet in it, and bolt these seats back in it. And that's what we'll run for the show this year. And then this winter, we'll find some time and go through and actually do the swap the correct way, the way I want to, and have the freaking 2011 to 16 seats and center console with all the cup holders and everything in it. And we'll get her set up. Thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe, share it with a friend. Let's keep this channel growing. You guys know what it is. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks for watching.